Know that I will tear your heads from your shoulders. The dead must have their tribute.
As big class reunions go, this one's gotta be the worst in history.
Years ago, we fought here as classmates. But not today.
Number 1. Fire Emblem Three Houses, released for the Nintendo Switch in 2019. Three Houses is a tactical RPG developed by Intelligent Systems and published by Nintendo, and is the 16th installment in the Fire Emblem series. This was the first title released for home consoles since Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, released in 2007 and mentioned much lower in our rankings. In this iteration, the game centers around a hub area filled with students called the Garreg Mach Monastery, and the player must choose one of 3 separate classes/factions to lead. The player, acting as a new professor at this soldiers' academy, is responsible for training, recruiting, and socializing students, as well as leading them through a series of battles. This game maintains the turn-based tactical gameplay of the previous Fire Emblem games, but the well-known weapon triangle mechanic is not present here. The weapon triangle from the previous entries is a kind of rock-paper-scissors mechanic during combat where certain weapon types are stronger or weaker against certain other weapon types. While this title does lack the weapon triangle, in this game your units can learn a variety of weapon-based skills called combat arts. Combat arts are learned by becoming proficient with a certain type of weapon. They are generally more effective than standard attacks but cause greater degradation to a weapon's durability. Like in the previous games, weapons have a set number of uses before they degrade and their stats are lowered. This title incorporates social simulation and time management elements, adding a lot of depth to the gameplay outside of battles. The game's school-like system and time skip later in the story took inspiration from the 4th installment, Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War, which was one of my favorite RPGs of all time and my favorite Fire Emblem game prior to playing this title. While hanging out in the monastery hub between storyline battles, the player has a set number of days marked on a calendar which can be used for a variety of activities. These include teaching classes, field exercises, planting seeds in the greenhouse, and fishing in the pond. While some of those activities might not sound all that interesting, when you're playing through the harder difficulties, you're going to find that you're going to do every single activity that you possibly can. Each action during the hub section of this game costs a set number of time points, and you have a limited number of time points each day. And there are more activities available to the player that are possible to take on in a single day, so the player must choose which activities to trigger, losing access to the activities skipped as a consequence. The player can participate in free time events where you can interact socially with the other students and build relationships with them. If your relationship with particular students becomes strong enough, your main character can marry one of the students after a story-based time skip event. This wasn't the first strategy RPG that I played where the game pushed the player to build relationships between characters, as Shining Force 3, one of my favorite games of all time, had a friendship system, but the relationship building mechanics in Three Houses it's a lot deeper than anything I've ever seen before. By raising certain attributes and taking certain actions, the player can recruit students to join his or her house. Some students are much more difficult to recruit than others, and certain characters are impossible to recruit, such as the leaders of the other houses and their assistants. A new feature introduced in this entry is the ability to hire and assign battalions to your units. Battalions have passive benefits that grant buffs to their assigned character, and they can perform special moves called gambits. Now, gambits add even more depth to the already deep battles, as certain gambits can heal multiple units or stun powerful enemies. In the higher difficulty settings of Three Houses, I found the gambits to be necessary to win some of the tougher fights. In fact, I found utilizing all the tools and subtle advantages that you could find in this game to be just absolutely required in the maddening mode, which was the highest difficulty when this game was released. When I took on maddening mode, it was actually my 4th playthrough, and I had a specific progression plan in mind from the start of the game. I had saved up my professor points from the previous playthroughs, as unused points carry over to subsequent campaigns. The professor points allowed me to take more actions each day, giving me an additional advantage in setting up for the mind-blowing difficulty in maddening mode. Did I mention that I played through this game 4 times? Yep, I beat this game 4. That's 4 separate times. One after the other, after the other, after the other. I enjoyed this game that much. As with other Fire Emblem entries, there was a classic mode in which when your characters go down in battle, they die permanently. Three Houses also offers a casual mode where fallen characters are automatically revived after finishing a battle. Upon reaching a certain part of the story, a player can rewind and undo a set number of turns per battle using the Divine Pulse ability.
How dare you get in the way of my brilliant plan? Run along now.
Thanks for all your help, sir.
This feature was a respite from the brutal difficulty that a player can easily stumble into while playing through this game. Each unit in Three Houses is assigned a character class, which can be customized. Class changes become available upon a student passing the certification exam for that class during the school segments. One of the things that I love about Three Houses is the variance, customization, and depth that you can find here. In regard to character classes, the following list covers the available classes you could assign to the students on your team. Now get ready for this, it's a pretty big list. These classes include Myrmidian, Soldier, Fighter, Monk, Lord, Mercenary, Thief, Cavalier, Pegasus Knight, Brigand, Armored Knight, Archer, Brawler, Mage, Dark Mage, Priest, Swordmaster, Hero, Assassin, Paladin, Warrior, Fortress Knight, Wyvern Rider, Sniper, Warlock, Dark Bishop, Bishop, Trickster, War Monk, War Cleric, Dark Flyer, Valkyrie, Falcon Knight, Wyvern Lord, Mortal Savant, Great Knight, Bow Knight, Dark Knight, Holy Knight, War Master, Grappler, Dancer, Mage, and Gremory. Yes, there are quite a few options in this game in case you were wondering. Now granted, a lot of the classes are different versions of other classes, but still, there are advantages and disadvantages to each class, and the variety and customization that you have here is just few RPGs go this in depth when it comes to character classes. Prior to starting a school week, lesson plans can be put into place to individually manage a unit's growth and save you some time. Options for doing this include building support between two classmates by engaging them in group assignments, or simply instructing the class automatically with the auto-instruct feature. Three Houses takes place on the continent of Fodlan, and the landmass is divided into three rival nations who are now at peace. These consist of the Adrestian Empire in the south and west, the Holy Kingdom of Fargus to the north, and the Leicester Alliance in the east. Players take on the role of Byleth, a former mercenary with a mysterious past who becomes the Garreg Mach Academy's newest professor. You can choose to make Byleth male or female, but this has little effect on the story of Three Houses. The player, as Byleth, must choose one of the three schoolhouses to lead and teach, each assigned to a different nation in Fodlan. These include the Black Eagles, led by Edelgard, an imperial princess and heir to the Adrestian throne, the Blue Lions, commanded by Prince Dimitri of Fargus, and the Golden Deer, led by Claude, heir to the leading family of the Leicester Alliance. I have quite a few friends that have played through this game. They all seem to agree that the Golden Deer and Claude, that's the least interesting path to go on. And I feel like I was kind of lucky because I chose the Golden Deer as my first choice of a class to lead. So I didn't have to worry about dreading playing the least interesting of the classes. I will agree that the Blue Lions and Black Eagles are more interesting than the Golden Deer. I definitely enjoyed those two storylines more. Wow, wow, wow. Now, I'm biased. JRPGs are my favorite genre, with strategy RPGs being my favorite subgenre. So this title definitely gets initial points just for that. But this game is simply incredible. While the multitude of different things and content in this game might seem overwhelming to a new player, I loved how meticulous you could be when developing your team and customizing each party member. And again, in the harder difficulties, it is somewhat mandatory to optimize your team as much as possible. I am generally opposed to the idea of DLC, and I rarely get into DLC for games, but I purchased the Three Houses DLC and played through the entire thing, which included new playable characters and storyline battles.
We're a unique bunch from all walks of life. Once you get to know us, I'm sure you'll love it here.
As well as a brand new, I guess you could say it's like a side hub area. I took on the DLC and did pretty much everything that you could do within it. Trust in my opinion on the greatness of Fire Emblem Three Houses. I am no Fire Emblem fanboy. I've only played through about a half dozen entries, and I straight up did not enjoy Radiant Dawn, which many people love, nor did I enjoy the first title, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, ranking it fairly close to the bottom of this list. That being said, Three Houses is a masterpiece. The combat is thrilling and enjoyable. The characters are engaging, interesting, and diverse. The story is fairly deep and very well told. I have zero interest in dating simulation gameplay, but the way Three Houses implemented it pushed me to explore that part of the game and mess around with it a bit, in my quest to do everything that I could to give my team an advantage, as well as to watch the additional cutscenes between the characters that you get to see through doing the dating simulation parts. Three Houses was one of those rare games that inspired me to set personal completion goals outside of simply completing the main story. I typically don't do extra stuff in a game unless I'm really into it, which I mentioned when I talked about Dragon Quest VI, the number 6 ranked game on my list. I beat Three Houses 4 separate times, one after the other, taking on new challenges in each of the game's 4 story paths and endings, one for the Blue Lions, one for the Golden Deer, and 2 somewhat separate paths for the Black Eagles. I've played many games over the last 2 years, 94 separate titles. Some were bad, some were good, but Fire Emblem Three Houses was my absolute favorite. I rank it number 1 on this gigantic list.
Reach for my hand, I am so